the last 25 years as an instructor in an undergraduate through graduate levels, including work as a coordinator of curriculum, assessment, and accreditation. Her current professional interest is in differentiated instruction for all students in the regular classroom and supporting parents as their children's most important teachers. She is a resident of Missouri, president of the Greene County Republican Women, and most importantly, she votes. So please make welcome Dr. Mary Bryne.
Thank you so much. I have an advantage over everybody else on the panel because I'm the elder member, and that counts because what I want to impress you with is that we have been here before as a country. In the late 1990s, it was called Outcome-Based Education and School to Work. The players were Mark Tucker of the National Center for Education and the Economy and Michael Cohen, who is now the president of Achieve. Those players are back. Phil Darrow, if you're familiar with that name, was on the Math Development Committee. Sally Hampton was on the English Language Arts Committee, and Mark Hampton himself was on the English Language Arts Feedback Committee. So they are heavy-handed invested in Common Core. If you read Mark Tucker's latest publication, May 2013, it is What Do We Mean by College and Work Readiness. He lays out the description of how Common Core was made, and it has very deep roots in the American Diploma Program. Now, most of you here are my age, so you'll know what I'm talking about. This is the same group of people. Mark Tucker wrote the Dear Hillary letter. Take that down and go to the internet and look at the Dear Hillary letter because it lays out the plan for the fundamental transformation of American education from the liberal arts of independent and free citizens to workforce planning and the development of human resources and human capital. Okay? That's why I'm here. Full disclosure, I get nothing out of this. Nobody pays me. I actually hit up my husband for the money to do this because I've been working with kids for 35 years. I know the heart and soul of a teacher who knows kids, and I cannot watch this happen. I went into education to set children free to their potential and look at people like Ben Carson, who came up from poverty through the public education system, who would be identified as a child with a disability with anger management problems, slow starter, who is now international notoriety for his pediatric neurology. Okay, public school teachers did that. And the math available to him did that. And if you read the Mark Tucker publication I told you in 2013, they say you don't need all of Algebra 2. For workforce planning, you need some geometry, some Algebra 2, and that'll get you into the most desirable or the most needed work that economists have projected. Okay, and that's why I'm here, is because you have to make the decision as to whether as free Americans, that's what you want for your children, or whether you want to give them the opportunity to even grope their way through life and discover themselves and what their potential is. That public education makes that difference, and I want our children to have all of the opportunity available.
Thank you, Dr. Byrne. We're now privileged to have Michael Brickman. He flew all the way in from Washington, D.C. He's the National Policy Director at the Thomas B. Fordham Institute, where he furthers educational excellence as a commentator on education reform issues and is a regular contributor to the Flypaper blog and other publications. He's also in the past served in communication roles on state and national political campaigns before being tapped by Governor Scott Walker to lead his education reform efforts in Wisconsin. While in the governor's office, he worked to support collective bargaining reforms, increase standards and accountability, expand school choice, and keep college affordable through innovative reforms. Michael graduated from the University of Delaware with an honors bachelor's degree in political science. Please help me make welcome Michael Brickman. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be back in the Midwest. I'm seeing a lot lot of familiar faces. I'm from Wisconsin, as was mentioned, and all of you who are from all these different states around the Midwest, please do yourself a favor, talk to the Wisconsin delegation, because dating back to 2010, 2012 with the recalls that we had, no one did more work, no one did harder work than the folks from Wisconsin. I think they had about 4 election cycles within the span of about 2 years, so props to them. Not only were they electing conservative candidates, but with their help, we were able to ensure that the people who were elected were enacting conservative reform in education, school choice, $1 billion in tax cuts, about $2 billion in savings through our union reforms, which today just had the impact of the Kenosha Teachers Union, which is the 3rd largest in the state of Wisconsin, is basically insolvent now because only 37% of the teachers, so these are the actual teachers in the Kenosha Teachers Union, voted to keep the union around. So we're showing that in Wisconsin, it's not just about the unions, it's about giving teachers a real voice that isn't mandated to them by the government. So had to give a shout out to Wisconsin because, like I said, it's really good to be back in the Midwest. But we're here to talk about the Common Core, and I think that it's not only a positive reform for education, but it's a positive conservative reform for education. Conservatives have been fighting for years, if not decades, to ensure that there's high standards in our schools. We want to leave our parents and our teachers and our local school boards the ability to teach the way they see best, but we want to make sure, as Reagan said, trust but verify, that they're actually teaching skills that are useful, that are going to prepare them for whatever path they choose. So not what anybody else chooses for them, but as Governor Fallon said this morning, if you're not prepared to read, if you're not prepared to do math at the basic level, you're not going to be good at much else. So we want to make sure that at the very basic level in math and reading, that's all the Common Core is math and reading, students are prepared at least a basic level. Real brief history, the Common Core came about because of unfunded and intrusive federal mandates which said all students, under no child left behind, had to be proficient eventually by 2014. Well, unfortunately, they let states, they said states had to come up with their own measure of proficiency, develop their own standards, and what states did is said, okay, well, we have to get every single kid up to proficiency, we're going to make it really, really easy to be proficient. And so that's what they did, that's what states, including my home state of Wisconsin, including Missouri, did. And what happened was students were graduating from high school and weren't ready for what's next. And we can get more into that later, but I think it's just really important to understand that we were not being honest with parents and teachers and the community and taxpayers about where their education system was going, because we were telling them that a high school diploma was the end goal. But the high school diploma, in many cases, meant not much of an end game for these kids. It meant that they weren't prepared for college, they weren't prepared for the workforce, for the military, or whatever path that they chose. And so we can get into that a little bit more. I'm sure a lot of people have other things to say, but I'm proud to support the Common Core, and I'm proud to be a conservative education reform minded person. So thanks for having me here tonight.
And now I'm very privileged to introduce someone I consider a good friend, someone that I had the honor to serve in the Missouri House with, Representative Andrew Koenig. He was elected in 2008. He currently represents the 99th District. That includes parts of Baldwin, Winchester, and Ellisville. The most important part about Andrew is he's a small business owner. So he understands, as he's representing people in the Missouri legislature, what's important and what's not important. He understands who he's there to protect. It's not the government, it's the constituents who work hard every day to make sure they make ends meet. He, of course, has been a signer of the No New Tax Pledge, so you can clap for him for that. You're not ever supposed to raise your taxes. That's not strong enough. We're going to be behind these guys. Let them know we support them. There you go. That's better. And he currently serves as the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, so that is the guy that you want making sure he signed the No New Tax Pledge. He's also on the elementary and secondary education, and education issues matter to Andrew, and I think you're going to hear it from him. I'm going to kind of break away a little bit here, but Andrew's one of the quiet guys. but never underestimate him. He's a guy that knows exactly what he believes, and that's the kind of people we need to be elected to a legislature. So please make welcome State Representative Andrew Caney.
I'd just like to thank everybody for coming out to learn about Common Core. When you're dealing with education, I believe in local control, and you can't get more local than the local school district and the local parent. Ultimately, the parents are the ones that should be in charge of their kids' education. And with Common Core, by the proponents, we're told that this is a state initiative. Yet there is also, the state seems to be seizing control to outside entities. And I don't think that's something the state of Missouri should be doing. When you have curriculum that is being essentially nationwide, and you can't deviate more than 15%, that ties the hands of the teachers in the classroom. I think it prohibits innovation, and that's a great concern. Another concern of mine is the data collection that could be happening with our students. I think we should make sure that our students, their information is held privately, and that they don't go to outside entities. When it comes to the federal government, I essentially think the Department of Education should be eliminated. So I'll just keep my comments brief since we have some other panels coming up. Thanks.
That's the George Costanza model right there. Go out on a high note, right? Absolutely. Well, the next panelist that we have here, I'm honored to be able to introduce, is Ann Gassel. She's a graduate of Northwestern University. She joined Gretchen Love as a co-editor on the Missouri Education Watchdog blog 2 years ago, and has been following Common Core for almost 3 years. She's one of the co-founders of Missouri Coalition Against Common Core and a member of Truth in American Education, which fights Common Core at a national level. She's a stay-at-home mom of 2 high school-aged children in the public school systems. So there, we need to clap for that right there. I'm fighting a cold, so I apologize here. She has butted up against the system more than a few times when it comes to policy, teachers, and curriculum. Ann is a Republican committee woman, and in her spare time helps run a Vacation Liberty School, which teaches middle schoolers across our country the founding principles of personal and economic liberty because the public school system no longer covers these topics. So please help me make welcome.
Thank you. I'm going to speak to you from the trenches where the rubber hits the road, so to speak. I did start following Common Core 2 years ago when I saw a chart that showed the millions of dollars that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation was pumping into promoting Common Core standards. And looking into Gates a little bit further and his Small Schools Initiative, which promised to be the answer to education, I found that it did not raise the schools in the scores in the lowest performing schools. And in fact, even Gates himself admitted that the program was a failure. I began to wonder, then why was everybody willing to go along with another one of this man's ideas for rescuing education? Now, 2 years later, something that the National Council of Teachers of English said was an historic national event has very low public awareness according to polls. So I have to wonder, why is that? Could it be because the process that was used violates, at least in principle, federal laws that prohibit the Federal Department of Education from getting involved in setting standards or developing national tests? I know the feds didn't write them, but they certainly had a major hand in paying for their development, and they're encouraging states to adopt them. They're also currently the sole funder of the test development process, thanks to the American reinvestment money. I've read as much as I could about the standards themselves, and I've talked to people who are on the CCSSI validation committee who refused to sign off on the standards because they said they did not feel that they would deliver on what was promised. The math standards leave our kids 2 years behind their peers in top-performing countries, and they never catch up if they stick with Common Core. The ELA standards lack rigor and content and minimize children's exposure to classic literature, which, according to a University of Toronto study, shows exposure to classic literature leads to critical thinking more than reading nonfiction does, and a greater ability to understand others. Now, collaboration seems to be a hot-button 21st century skill that everybody wants our kids to have, and yet this focus on informational text seems that it's going to actually reduce children's ability to do this. This is one of a number of contradictions that I find in the standards, like the promise that they are fewer and clearer, and yet our own Department of Education had to develop a glossary of terms because as people were beginning to unpack the standards, they could not understand what they were being asked to do. Most concerning of all to me is the fact that my state had actual legislation, Senate Bill 389, that required the Curriculum Alignment Initiative to develop a competencies model that defines the skills and knowledge that should be mastered by high school graduates to be successful in beginning collegiate courses. We were well on our way to developing these standards, particularly in math. Yet a mere year after that final report was delivered to the Department of Higher Education, our governor signed our state onto a set of standards that hadn't even been written yet, much less reviewed or approved by our institutions of higher education. How could I not conclude that CCSSI has some other force, political or otherwise, that is driving it and not an actual concern for improvement in education? I live in the world of reality, not a world that has the luxury to parse words or to focus on intent. I talk to teachers and parents every week who are on the front lines of implementing Common Core, who know that it is a meaningless distinction to say that the states and local districts still have full control of curriculum. Since so much emphasis has been placed on the assessments for teacher evaluations, school performance, and accreditation, it is close to impossible to resist the temptation to teach to the test. And since the consortia test is aligned to the standards, the test is what is going to drive curriculum and is going to tell the teachers what to teach. So local control of curriculum is an empty promise. I would like to see Common Core out of our state.
Yeah.
All right, our final panelist, and I may not say this correctly because I just got it, Dave Myslinski. All right, tremendous. He serves as a communication specialist for the Foundation for Excellence in Education. He has previously served as Education Task Force Director at the American Legislative Exchange Council, which is a member of ALEC in the past, and I know that Representative Andrew King is a member of ALEC. They're a tremendous force for good. They're at Capitol Hill, but they actually work across our state legislatures. They're in Washington, D.C., but they work to help get conservative principles implemented in our state capitals. It's where he focused on digital learning, K-12 education reform, and higher education. Prior to that, Dave worked on state issues relating to healthcare and telecommunications. Dave is a graduate of Rutgers University. Before I bring him up, we are now going to go into the part after he's done with his comments where you have an opportunity to make questions. So please be thinking about the questions you're going to ask for panelists, and we'll have about 30 minutes to be able to do that. But please help me welcome Dave here as he gives his comments this afternoon.
Thanks for being here. As I said, I used to be the Director of the Education Task Force at ALEC, and that's where I was first introduced to Common Core. I didn't really know much about it, and this was about in 2010. And as I learned more about it, I became a bigger fan of it. And there are certain things that certainly need to be clarified as far as what they are, how they came about, and how they can help students. So one thing that I worked a lot about when I was at ALEC and currently at the Foundation for Excellence in Education is school choice. Specifically, at my current position, I work a lot on digital learning, making sure that all students, whether they're in an urban area and have access to charter schools or in a rural area where charter schools aren't really a viable option, can have access to the highest quality courses through digital learning or whatever means necessary. I'm a huge school choice proponent. That includes homeschooling.
I'm trouble hearing you.
Oh, sorry. I'm a huge school choice proponent, and that includes homeschooling as well, and all options. The Common Core state standards are replacements for existing state standards. So state standards have existed for years, and these don't change the relationship that the state has with the schools. With homeschooling, none of that changes. The data privacy concerns, I'm certainly concerned hearing what the federal government is doing. That's a huge concern for me. But that is a separate issue from Common Core, and that should be dealt with separately. If any state removes themselves from Common Core, which they have that full ability to do so, the data privacy concerns still remain. So I just want to, I guess, simplify it down to these are state standards defining what Algebra 2 is, and making sure whether you're in Missouri or Iowa that Algebra 2 is the same, teaches the same concepts, and at the end of the course, you know the same material. The way you get there, that's all determined by the local control. And again, I'm a huge proponent of local control. So I'll end there and be happy to answer questions as we're about to go into.